2 Kings chapter 4, it'll be up on the screen for you to follow along. We're going to read the first 7 verses. One of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, has died. You know that your servant feared the Lord. Now the creditor is coming to take my 2 children as his slaves." Elisha asked her, "What can I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" She said, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." And that in the original language does not mean like vegetable oil or olive oil. It means anointing oil. It would be something that you would receive visitors and anoint them as they walked in to be your honored guest. So they didn't even have oil to cook with. She said, "Your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go and borrow," everybody say borrow. "Go and borrow empty containers from everyone, from all your neighbors. Do not get just a few. Then go in and shut the door behind you." So put aside every distraction and make sure you won't get interrupted. "And your sons, and pour oil into all these containers. Set the full ones to the side." So the full ones go where? Off to the side. So she left the prophet Elisha. After she had shut the door behind her and her sons, they kept bringing her containers, and she kept pouring. When they were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another container." But he replied, "There aren't any more." Then the oil stopped. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debt. You and your sons can live on the rest." Just for those of you in this room that are a little bit like myself, some historical points in there. Not biblical fact, but historical tradition would lean towards the fact that this woman was married to the man named Obadiah, one of the prophets. The story you can look in earlier on in the Bible lends the fact that, remember, Elijah was sort of hiding from King Ahab and his wife, Queen Jezebel, and he thought he was the only righteous person left in all of Israel. But the Bible tells us that actually Obadiah was serving in the king's palace and was hiding righteous people up in the hills, and then he would take what was left from the king's table and have it sent up into these hideouts, into these caves. And so the allusion here, and what the historical understanding is that this is the wife of Obadiah, and Obadiah had passed away. So somebody that was well known in the nation for fearing the Lord, being righteous. And so we're going to break this apart, and then we're going to apply it to what I believe the Lord is calling us to, this congregation, Colorado Church. How many jars were they sent out to get? All they could, right? They were only told, don't get just a few. Get as many as you can. And in my mind, I think of jars of all multiple sizes. Some like the size of a water bottle. Some the size of sort of the ritual water basins that Jesus turned water into wine. And so I imagine this room or this house is filled with all the jars that they could possibly get. Some of them more valuable than others. Some of them larger than others. And the sons, the 2 sons, keep going and coming back and going and coming back, and they're asking everybody. It says they're borrowing from their neighbors, which was probably more acceptable in their time than it is our time. You know, maybe you have one neighbor on your street or next door that you feel like, hey, you could send one of your kids and say, "Hey, I need a cup of sugar. I started baking something and we ran out," right? But some of us live in situations where it's like, I couldn't ask my neighbors for a jar or a vessel or something like that. If I did, I might have to introduce myself to my neighbors, right? But in these villages, in these tight-knit communities, especially if they were sort of cloistered together in this company of prophets in training, if you would. Elijah was seen as the leader there, and then he passed his mantle on to Elisha. And so Elisha was the default leader, and so therefore this widow comes and asks him that. They witness a miracle in the privacy of their own home, and this woman starts to pour the vessel of oil Remember, it's anointing oil, not food oil, not vegetable oil. And she starts to pour it, and it starts to fill multiple containers. Some of the containers it's pouring into are much larger than the container that it's pouring out of, right? When they get the house packed full of these vessels and jars and containers, the oil stops flowing. Now, we know the end of this story, that they were able to go and sell it and pay off their debt, and the sons weren't enslaved, and then they were probably some of the most wealthy people in that community. If you were selling a house full of oil, it would change your personal economics very rapidly, right? Think of something valuable to your life, and then picture that being in stacks or in containers in your living room, right? You'd like to have that. So it changed their whole situation. And I wonder, after they pay their creditor, and then after they start living off of these full containers, selling the oil, I wonder if it crossed their minds, man, I wish we would have gotten some other containers, right? Because potentially you go to your neighbor and they have an empty container, right? They have one that they just either finished using or they haven't used in a while, and they can say, well, you can borrow this one. I'm going to need it back, but this one's empty. Because if it were you and I running back and forth, the first thought through our mind would be, I need containers that I can fill. But after the fact, when you're then selling the oil and living off of it, don't you think that those boys and that widow would have looked back and thought, man, I should have begged my neighbor to empty all of their vessels, empty all of their containers, so that they could be filled with something much more valuable. Imagine the containers that were half full of something that was like flour or wheat, something that they couldn't sell or use to the point that they could with this oil. I think the brothers probably thought, man, had we known, I would have got all the vessels. I would have got all the jars. I would have got all the containers, and I would have dumped it out. I would have said, hey, let's spread out a blanket in my neighbor's front yard, and I'll dump out your wheat, and I'll dump out your flour, and I'll dump out your grain, and I'll dump out the water. I'll dump out whatever it is, because you think that that's valuable to you, and we don't want to waste it, which we won't. But I'll buy that, right? If the oil can sell for more than the flour, then why not dump out the flour and fill the vessel up with oil? Some of you guys are 30 minutes ahead of me right now, right? Because after the fact, we would have said, man, I would have emptied every vessel in the village if I knew that the oil wouldn't stop until we ran out of containers. Now, oil is a symbol of the Holy Spirit. And vessels or containers are symbols for people. So let me take a moment, read a text that I received from somebody who got baptized here. And we're trying to make a path, just like we did on the sidewalks today. Let's make it as easy as we possibly can for people to come and experience God so that they can know God. I got this text from somebody whose life is being changed. I find my priorities just completely changing, this person says. I worked 15 out of 16 Sundays at the end of 2019. After this past weekend, I prayed and talked to God and had a meeting with my boss saying my availability has changed for good. God is just giving me this sense of inner strength, and I can't do this alone, and it is so important to me to not just attend church, but to connect with this community and commit. I believed when you said life would change in 3 months, and I am seeing what God is doing. Just, again, Evan, thank you. Because I think that all of us are called like those boys. Let's go out and find all of the vessels. And at first we think we just got to find some that haven't connected yet, or some that are empty, or some that haven't been used in a while. But if you think through that story the whole time, we should all be running out of here going, let's get all the vessels we can and fill them, because what they're full of right now is not nearly as valuable as what we have in the presence of God to give them. If oil is a symbol of the Holy Spirit, God's very presence dwelling amongst us and inside of us, jealous for our spirit that lives inside of us, then it's our job to go out and get all the vessels we can and say, just come on in and be filled up in the presence of the Lord. You know, the interesting thing, let me read this to you again. Verse 4. Then go in and shut the door behind you and pour oil into all these containers. Set the full ones to the side. So the full ones go where? To the side. Your fullness positions you for future service and makes room for others to be filled. So as we get filled, then our needs are now no longer central to what's happening in the house. And as we get filled, we get set to the side. Why? So that an empty vessel can come in the place where we once were. How many of us once were totally empty, neglected, unused, filled with other things not nearly as valuable as the living presence of God that we now know lives inside of us? And as we get filled, guess what happens? We get positioned for future use. Are you just set to the side like, well, okay, you're just over here to collect dust? No, you're set to the side because it positions you for your future outpouring, and it makes room for the empty vessel that's supposed to come and take your place. So if we're continually showing up to a community, a congregation, a gathering, an ecclesia, a church, and our thought is, I'm coming in to get filled, then what happens is we're actually in the place where we are called to position others in. And so we get filled, and then we're positioned for our future use, an outpouring of what we received. So, verse 3 says, then he said, go and borrow empty containers from everyone, from all of your neighbors. Borrowing, it lends to the thought of I'm stewarding something. If it said go steal all the vessels, if it said go take all the vessels, if it said go buy all the vessels, but it says go borrow all the vessels, which means that I'm temporarily stewarding these empty vessels, because then I'm going to return them. So there's stewardship and responsibility, shared responsibility, that we're supposed to take care of these things and not return them out broken, but actually return them used. And the idea would be that you actually borrow them from your neighbors, and then you sell them back to your neighbors, and now they're full and useful in those houses. There's a stewardship issue. Those of you who were here a couple weeks ago when we baptized 10 people, that was so fun and so amazing. And I got to participate in most of it, and Derek and Amber baptized their daughter Addison, and Mike baptized his 3 boys, and that was fun. But if you were here, if you remember, it was the tub was right here, and I would kneel down and I would introduce you to who was getting baptized, and then I would tell you just a snippet of who they were. I went home that afternoon, and I thought to myself, I hope that's the last time I can do that. Do I mean that's the last time that I baptize people here? No. I hope that's the last time that I can be the one trying to rip open my heart and tell you who this person is, and tell you the journey that they've been in, and share the fact that we had coffee across a table, and I begged them to plug in and surrender their life to Jesus and give their life to the Lord and find their dearest, deepest friendships that they've ever had in this congregation. I want it to be the last time that I can tell every single story. Because if I could beg you of something, I would beg you. We only have, some of us, a few years, and some of us a few decades, and every one of us would stand up and say, it goes so fast. If I could say, go out and borrow all the empty vessels and bring them in here so that we can fill them with the presence of God. I hope to God that was the last time that I baptized people, and I'm able to tell you their names and their stories, because I want to put a microphone in your hand as you represent your small group, and you say, as a small group, we rallied around this person. We invited this person. We had conversations with this person, and they decided to surrender their life to the Lord. And we asked them, what's the next step that you need to take? Have you ever been baptized? And then we walk them. I want small groups to gather where I once kneeled. I want some of you to walk somebody up to the waters of baptism and grab a mic and say, this is my dear friend who I might not have even known in February. And say, but their life has changed. Their priorities are new. They've decided that instead of working on Sundays, they're going to do everything they can, which takes some guts. For the person that I read that text, it takes, I know their personality, just to approach their boss and say, my priorities have changed, my availability has changed with it, and so I can no longer help around here on Sundays because I have to insert myself into a community that is changing my life. I have emptied myself of the things that no longer do I hold valuable, and I'm going to be filled every single week with the presence of the Lord. And here's my prayer, is that it's that those that are coming out of the waters of baptism would be a witness to us, to help us to understand that. But then those who are getting baptized would say, I've been filled and I've been changed, and I want you to change. And I want you to come and experience the life. So if this message is called collecting containers, I can beg from here, but I know that each of us, including myself, has certain hesitations, right? We wish that we didn't have that thing in our mind that held us back, that we were just bold enough to be evangelistic in our core, to say, I'm gonna go do it, and I want you to do it. I don't want you to be weird and strange. You know, you don't need to write on a cardboard box and stand up on 16th Street Mall and that sort. But I want it to be so fresh inside of your heart that it just is something that you yearn for. But I know that we have hesitations. So understanding our hesitations, let me tell you a couple of stories. Some of us, in order to be an appropriate witness for Jesus, need to be set free from things that are holding us back. Some of us have junk in our life that we need to get removed. I had a trash company, and for the sake, I won't name the name of the trash company. They won't be around in a year or two anyways, because they're terrible. We had a trash company that would just decide, like, hey, we're not coming today. And instead of coming the next day, they would just be like, okay, well, we'll come next week. And I'm like, but I'm paying you to come on a consistent basis, and I know you don't know this, but I've got 5 kids. So the amount of recycle and trash that we produce is just more than the average single person. So if you miss a week, if we miss a week, our neighbors know that, right? And our neighborhood isn't as unified with the trash system. So sometimes it's just us that gets missed, and everybody else has awesome trash companies. So I just decided, you know what? I'm sick and tired of it, and I need my trash gone. So I call them up, because I look online, and they say the only way that you can cancel is by talking to a real life human being. I was like, what year is it? so I call, it sends me to an automated message. It says I'm number 300 or something. And then it's just music that you're just terrible. So I put it on speakerphone, and I'm doing other stuff. And every once in a while, it'll update which slot I'm in. I'm telling you, 2 hours maybe. I got from 313 or something all the way down to 148. And I was like, okay, it feels productive. A couple minutes later, I just automatically get sent to a voicemail. I was like, oh, now you made me mad. So I try a couple of different things, and I realize, hey, I'm just going to have to keep calling. So I pick different times of the day and do the same thing. Put it on speaker and then just do other things and wait. I was surprised one time. There was one time I was like, I'm only going to stay on for an hour, and then I'm going to shut it off. And if they bill me and I don't pay it, I'll take, whatever. So right at 58 minutes on hold, somebody answers. I was so charismatic in that moment. Like, I was jumping around. Nobody was even by me. I was like, they answered. They answered. This poor girl on the other end was like, oh my gosh, So, but why do I tell you that story? Because some of us won't take 2 hours, and some of us won't take 1 hour, and some of us won't schedule it into our day to break free and live in freedom, to get the junk out of our life. Because sometimes our systems are just broken, and we got trash piling up in our life, and the trash piling up in our life keeps us from sharing the good news that actually transformed our life. And some of us just need to take 1 hour this week and break free. To end a contract, to end a relationship, to end a habit, to break a habit so that we can be set free, so that we get junk out of our life, so that then we can invite people into life. Does that make sense? Poor trash company. I put the words in my notes, petrified baby raccoon. And Stephen texted me and was like, it's going to be a good Sunday when you have the words petrified baby raccoon in your notes. And I'm sure I've shared this story with some of you. And we moved into our house in 2012, and it had a big steel fireplace insert in it. And it was one where it's supposed to suck the air around behind an empty cavity, warm that air up, and then send it back into our house. And the only problem is it fit about one log, and when you actually turned it on, it sounded like somebody was running the vacuum in the living room. And I was like, we're not ever going to use this. Like, I want a real wood fire. And so we tried to figure out, can I get this out? And it weighs like 300 pounds, and I just didn't want it to be like connected to the chimney up there, so that if I moved it, then I have like a project that I'd have to like hire somebody for. So I was trying to be careful, and I'm trying to pull this back on this side and put my phone flashlight up to see if it was connected. And so I pulled one side out, and you kind of have to like then get on your back and lean on the brick and shove yourself back there. And from one side, I was like, I think I can just get this out, and it's not connected. But I needed to see the other side. So I go over to the other side, same thing, and now I'm more confident to I'm already dirty, so I'm like sliding on my back, shoulders inside here, and looking up this way. And as I'm doing that, I glance right over here, and about 2 inches from my face is a petrified baby raccoon. It had been, fully heated multiple times. Yeah, that'll wake you up. So we get that out. We pull out the insert and all that, and now we have a wood-burning fireplace, and that was the first part of our transformation of this one room. And this room had sort of nasty carpet in it, and it looked definitely like when the house was built in the 70s, and we just wanted to paint the walls and get new carpet in, and so we saved up, and we eventually did that, and it was a slow process. When we pulled up the carpet, I realized that in a house my age, the age of this house, they had actually replaced the carpet before, and they had replaced the floorboards that sit on the beams above our crawl space. And I was thinking about that it was brand new boards, and it was painted over with that Kills sealant paint. What went through my mind was, whoever lived in our house before, a raccoon fell down the chimney and began to die. Smell that in your mind. And then imagine you have no idea where that smell is coming from. You think that the dogs have peed, you think something's died in the crawl space. You'll do anything to mitigate the smell and the stench of death from your house. And they did, and they spent thousands of dollars in that. We try to mitigate the stench of death in our lives by trying to fix those things which are not the problem. If they knew where and what the problem was, they could have done what I did. Move the fireplace insert and then ask your wife to move the petrified baby raccoon. I think there's some of us in this room that we're willing to make adjustments in certain areas of our life. But we won't dare to pull back the one area in our life that needs the most change. And if you want to fill empty vessels, then what we need to do is we need to break contracts that aren't working for us. And if it takes an hour, then spend an hour doing it. We waste our time on so many other things anyways. Let's waste our time on trying to get rid of the contracts in our life that are keeping junk in our life. And then let's not work on the things in our life that aren't the issue. We can be busy doing the work of righteousness, but not find freedom because we're working on the wrong area. And if you need help, ask for help. If it's too hard or too heavy to pull that thing out, or if it's too scary to actually touch the thing that has died in your life, that's why we have small groups, and that's why this church is based on relational connectivity, centered around the good news of Jesus, so that you can ask somebody that you're opening up your life to and say, hey, this is too hard for me, but if you and I can do it together, I know that we can get through this. I think it's our opportunity and it's our responsibility. James 5 says this: if any among you strays from the truth and someone turns him back, let him know that whoever turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his life from death and cover a multitude of sins. The word that's written there twice is the word turns. It doesn't say reprimand and it doesn't say condemn. It says turn. I'm going to get to teach Noah how to drive. He just got his permit. He's 15 years old, so you can pray for me and my wife. But one of the things that you'll have to teach is to make an appropriate turn. What's a bad turn? A bad turn is something that's choppy or overly corrective. A good turn is a gentle, you ease into the turn. You're looking just a few yards ahead and you're making a nice turn. A bad turn is when somebody's head goes sideways too far, or you stop halfway through it. It feels a little bit jerky or overcorrective, right? And James tells us, if any among you strays from the truth and someone turns him back, let him know that whoever turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his life from death and cover a multitude of sins. Evangelism is inviting, it's not demanding. I think some of us grew up in an era where we were taught about Christianity in the aspect of what not to do, right? Don't do this. Make sure you never do this. Don't look at this. Don't touch this. Don't smell this. Don't look this way. Don't act this way, right? And really, we should have been told, just come this way. Just turn a little bit, and I'm telling you, your perspective will change. I tell it to the people that are surrendering their life to Jesus in this place. I say, in 3 months, your life is going to be totally different, and you're going to find the best friends that you've ever known. Because I'm not telling them, you need to right now stop what you're doing. I know that if I can just turn them in the direction that we're all going, those things will fade away. Because you will gladly dump out the rocks and the pebbles if you know that you'll get filled up with oil. So it's our responsibility, but it's also our opportunity to turn somebody. It's our opportunity to invite others to experience life. It's our responsibility too. Luke 6:44, it's not going to go onto the screen. I'm going to put a picture up on the screen. It says, for each tree is known by its fruit. So if you guys have, what type of tree is this? Okay, so some of you guys have better eyesight than others, but I heard correctly. That's an orange tree. Okay, how did you tell that was an orange tree? By looking at the leaves? No, you knew it was an orange tree because you looked at the fruit. You didn't identify it by the leaves. Let's stop spending our time concentrating on our leaves. Let's spend some time producing fruit. You know, we started this year off with 21 days of prayer, and one of the people who came to a good portion of the prayer meetings, he pulled me aside and he showed me his journal, and he said, these prayer meetings have got me back on track. And now I'm reading my Bible and I'm journaling every day. I actually put my stuff by my coffee pot so that when I wake up and I start to make coffee, this is the thing that I have to grab and hold on to while I'm making coffee, because he's adjusting his priorities, and now he's concentrating on his fruitfulness. My desire is that you would be filled with the Spirit, the very presence of the Lord, and that as you experience new life, your desire would be to search for others who need to be filled with the presence of the Lord.